Look at that. See? Okay, so thank you all for coming to join us today. And to give you a little bit of background on how we just came up with this thought process to really just create a space where we could have some conversations about what the next few months, not only in fraternity sorority life, but just coming back to our campuses is going to look like. Right? We do have lots of organizations that will be potentially coming back in person, and plenty of people who have not had the opportunity to either meet in person, see one another in person for potentially well over a year. So we thought that it would be a good idea to really just create a space where we could have some conversations about what we have seen, what our experiences have been, what some of our plans may be, share some thoughts and ideas about how to handle potential situations that may come up. And Sarah and I probably don't have all of the answers, as I'm sure nobody really does, because nobody knows what the next few months are going to look like. I'm going to knock on wood, hoping that everything continues to get better as time goes on. But I do know that I think we'll continue to be in a world that is continually changing, and everything could change tomorrow. Even Sarah and I talked yesterday, and I'm getting on a plane on Sunday and going to Kansas City, and I'm like, oh God, I just heard that like Missouri has one of the highest rates of the Delta variant. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll deal with that. But you know, nobody really knows what can happen. So like I said, we wanted to create this space to just have some really informal conversation. And Sarah and I have done some reading and some watching of different videos that have been put out there, just as potential resources to have some more conversations on this topic. I think that we have seen different things and different perspectives from different organizations and different institutions, as I'm sure Kari and William will be able to share with us as well. So we just kind of wanted to put out the conversation on what this could look like. I think in my mind right now, the social tightening concept really comes down to how we are going to come back to our campuses to create a more social community when people are in a setting where they may not know one another. And specifically in the fraternity and sorority community, where these are supposed to be your brothers and sisters, and you may not have had the opportunity to meet face to face, or you may just have been on the computer with one another. Some people have cameras, some people don't. So even Sarah brought up a good point yesterday, like, have people been catfished? Like, who knows, right? And let's hope not, but I don't, nobody really knows what that's going to be. So we wanted to kind of just start some feelers out there to kind of see where everybody was at. And Kari and William, I don't know if you want to share where your institutions are at in terms of coming back and what that looks like and what your plans are, or what the institution's plans are right now for students coming back to campus. If you've had any conversations specifically regarding any kind of recruitment plans or anything like that at this point.
Yeah, sure. So little piece of information. I've been in this role for about a month. So I previously, for the last year and a half, I was in the University of Tulsa Alumni Engagement Office.
Okay.
But I had a background in FSL, having previously worked for my national headquarters as well as my graduate assistantship. So I saw it as just a great opportunity to step back into things. And University of Tulsa, we were fortunate enough to never have to leave campus last year. Our students followed a very strict social distancing and mask policy, and we were able to stay on campus. So we're kind of approaching this as like we're expecting this we're calling it like the Roaring 20s, because we expect our students to really try to do anything and everything socially. So we're trying to be very cautious in working with our officers and working with our social chairs and risk chairs, and making sure that there is a written strategic plan specifically toward social events and towards, being safe for those events. Specifically for recruitment, we are planning on going through with recruitment, much like past. So a little piece of information about TU is that they do a formal recruitment for both fraternities and sororities, and then following formal recruitment, then they have year-round continuous open bidding policies for all fraternities, and then for the sororities that qualify. So pretty much what we have set up is all like we're moving forward business as usual, with the exception of a masking policy if our student vaccination rates are under 75%. So we're having our students submit their vaccination records to our health center's portal online, and we're currently measuring that, and it's continuing to go up. We're not quite at that 75% mark, but we're kind of using that as an incentive for students, like, hey, get vaccinated, submit your records, and we can have a recruitment as usual. And then as far as just like kind of rebuilding the community, we're fortunate enough to not have everyone, people have met each other, people have interacted, but stepping in this position, I'm kind of sending the message that this is a fresh start, and that I'm really listening. I'm open and willing for all social ideas that they present to me. And pretty much my message is, hey, let me know your idea. I'm gonna give you the resources. I'm gonna give you what you need to have this event or this idea come to fruition. But I'm also going to kind of give you tips and advice for making sure that it complies with university and in some cases state and federal policies. So it's exciting. I'm excited to get back in the swing of things.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. I feel like I have not heard of another institution that has had the opportunity to stay in person throughout this whole pandemic. So it's a rare occurrence for
we're smaller. We're smaller in numbers, so I think that had a lot to do with our ability.
Sure.
I've heard of another school that was the same way. They were a smaller liberal arts school down in North Carolina, and they were able to stay full capacity. I know the school I advise at, every student got a single who chose to live on campus, and they are requiring vaccinations for students for the fall. And then FDU, where I got my master's, I believe they made this call before a lot of other schools did. They are making students if you want to be on campus for anything, if you're a commuter, you still need to be vaccinated. It can't just be the residential students if you plan on being on campus or anything. But and I know some other schools in the Pittsburgh area are requiring it as well. But that's actually pretty cool that y'all were able to stay on campus and following those policies. But kind of going to your point real quick about wanting to give them opportunities to be social, I think it's great. I would love for students to go and have in person again and have that social interaction, but also approach it with caution and realize that even though we were all on campus last year, it doesn't mean we all felt comfortable, right? So even now with the mask being lifted, some students may feel safer with a mask on, and that's completely fine, or they may not feel ready to come into these larger settings yet. You know what I mean? Like sort of in that sense. But that's where another thing I was telling Amanda, we may need to have like a hybrid option for students as well, so that everybody feels included, which is a whole other topic of inclusivity and stuff like that. But yeah, no, that's really cool to hear.
Did you find, William, at all that you had students that were concerned about being in person or being in spaces with a large amount of people, or were people all on board with kind of like, yeah, this is great, we're going to continue to function as we've always done?
Everything I've heard so far is everyone's on board. And we have not lifted the mask mandate yet.
Okay.
Again, it's dependent on vaccination rates. So, we still plan on taking the precautions. However, you do bring up a good point about accessibility, especially when it comes to recruitment. And having just recently stepped in this role, I haven't even had that conversation with some of the students and the advisors about a virtual option for recruitment.
I mean, you could do a hybrid. You could do like the first round where there's a lot of like PNMs, for example, you do it virtually and go into breakout rooms. And then as you get to like, I'm saying from like an NPC standpoint, like your preference round, when there's not as many per party, you can have it in person. And one thing I remember talking to people about who did virtual recruitment last year is that they felt that these were more genuine conversations because they weren't like this piece of bread and all these seagulls going after them, right? Where it's like all like one PNM to like 20 sisters or brothers. It was more like I could have that genuine conversation and you're not necessarily shouting and competing and comparing yourself to the guy or the girl standing next to you. So that's something you could also consider whenever you do recruitment.
I just want to take a minute and also welcome Chris. I know you just joined us, so thanks for coming in. I made everybody a panelist because for some reason the webinar wasn't just letting me let all of the attendees in. So welcome. We just started a few minutes ago, just going through kind of where we're at with our institution and what decisions have been made in terms of coming back in person or virtual. So William was just sharing with us, and we're just chatting about that a little bit. So Kari, I don't know if you want to give us some information about where y'all are at.
Sure. Well, name's Kari. I work at the University of North Texas. Actually, I've probably been in this gig for probably longer than a lot of other people. I've been working in fraternity sorority life for around 16 years. And actually at UNC for 6. So I've been here for a while. And the thing is,
nothing to be ashamed about, my friend. Nothing to be ashamed about. Nothing to be ashamed about.
Yeah, appreciate you. But let me think. I believe in why I've been here so long, just like what Sarah said, I believe in the fraternity sorority life experience in a big way. And so one of the things I express to a lot of the students that I work with, here we have 40, well, actually we have 43 chapters here. What I tell them is that, because they say, they also say business as usual, but the thing is that because of that there's such a unknown, I say it's an in-person experience. That's what the difference is. It's an in-person experience. It doesn't like necessarily define, oh yeah, this is what it is. Like it's going right back to the way it was, like when, let's go ahead and say one of our NPHC organizations would have their numeric presentation and they'd have 1,000 people in the auditorium. That's not going to happen, most likely. So let's not think about that that's what's going to happen, that you can just go ahead and do that and it's all good. So that's actually been probably my biggest, that's the hardest thing right there, is teaching everybody else, like, no, that's what it is. But people have started to be receptive to it. They've been fine with that. When it comes to the university as a whole, I mean, you've got both sides here, as most in every other state. In Texas, like you've got people that are way on one side of, hey, like let's go ahead and we can wear masks and stuff. Mm-hmm. And you got people on the other side who are like, nah, it's all good. I've had my mask ripped off of my face here in Texas. Like, so it's very different. So the thing is that I've got mine right here. Mm-hmm. Like I wear mine all the time. And truthfully, it's just been to a point where people have to agree to disagree once again. And that's where the education is. It's just like, hey, somebody's got one on, cool. Someone else doesn't, all right, great.
Right.
Like as long as you understand and you're good with, like what consequences could come about, whether having one on or not having one on, then all right. So far, so good. But like I said, there's so much uncertainty that you can see a lot of people going, well, I'm going to do this. And then all of a sudden, like seconds later, they change their ideas completely. And that's just what happens. And that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm a military person. I'm not used to doing that. You know, like, hey, you got to go ahead and, you know, let it happen. You know, let it marinate. Let your decision is your decision. Let it be a decision that you made. And then if it doesn't work out, change it, keep it moving. But if, you know, like if you continuously change, you're never going to know whether something works or not.
Yeah,
So,
and I think too, Kari, with the consistency, even with our events, right? Like what we're gonna say can be allowed in person versus what cannot be allowed in person. We need to have that clear line of, because we can't be saying, oh well, Pi Phi, you can have this in person, but Beta, you can't do that in person. And there are similar events, right? You know what I mean? Like we have to, like, we want to take it case by case, but you also have to keep the consistency, because even with COVID, you're told one thing and then boom, it's a completely different thing. And, you know, that's where a lot of people had issue with, you know, and then obviously you get into your state and local levels of what they're deeming what to do and stuff. But yeah, that's something we have to think about too. You bring up a good point, like the consistency, sticking to a plan. There's some schools that still don't even know that if they're coming back to campus or not. And I'm like, y'all start classes in a month and you need to get it together. Like this is no more, well, we're going to take it day by day. Like, no, there are some things you can make this call now. There are schools who made the call months ago. Like you can't keep doing this on the fly stuff. And I get we need to be flexible, but it gets to a point where it's going to become frustrating and it's going to create this tension. It's going to add another layer to what we're coming back to in the fall. And we don't want that.
that's very
Well,
true.
and I think that the care and concern and safety and security of our students is definitely the number one priority. And I think, Kara, you bring up a good point, like your decision is your decision on whether or not you want to wear a mask, right? Like we don't have a mask mandate in Louisiana, but I still wear mine. I'm fully vaccinated. Like I know for myself, like that's my comfortability level. I'm sure people are going to think if I'm wearing a mask that I'm not vaccinated. I don't care. But I was also one of the people at the beginning of the pandemic who was like I didn't leave my house for 3 months just because that was my level of comfortability. I mean, I didn't have a level of comfortability, I guess I should say. Right, exactly. So I think that like we're going to need to be able to make sure that our conversations with our students create a space where they feel comfortable even having that conversation. Number one, I think we're going to have to be creative in some of our approach to coming up with those consistent measures that y'all are talking about. And I think that we are also going to have conversations with our membership organizations just about being brotherly and sisterly and the overall kindness factor, because everybody's comfortability level may not be the same and it may look different. So we need to make sure that we are asking them to step outside of their comfort zone a little bit in what the expectations are for membership in general. So Chris, I want to give you the opportunity also to kind of introduce yourself and where your institution is at with everything going on, I guess. Oh, you're on mute.
You would think, people are ready. Hi everyone, Chris Medrano Graham, and I've been the associate director of fraternity and sorority life at Florida International University. And our university is actually, for our summer B, or what is deemed the early fall, has been back at 100% of everything, room reservations, activities. Some staff still wear masks, but students aren't wearing masks at all. So, Florida is a unique state in regards to our governorship, and we never really closed per se, and so it's been a little crazy, but yeah, some same things that you guys were saying in regards to the recruitment piece, and the inconsistency. I definitely can, follow everyone on that same path of the inconsistency of like one moment it's this, one moment it's that. And so that was one of the biggest, I would say, challenges during COVID, right? Because the university kept creating approval chains and queues, if you will. So first it was nothing. And then 2 months in, it was like, well, if external relations approves of your event, and so on and so forth. And so it was just, it's been a hot mess without consistency. But starting this early fall, everything is like literally 100% back, as if like what pandemic, and that's a Florida thing. Sometimes Florida, we make our own rules sometimes, and live in an alternative reality sometimes. But that's basically where it is for Panhellenic recruitment. It's a hybrid recruitment. We're doing hybrid. So round one, and we don't even have that many organizations. We have 7 sororities. But for round one, we include MPHC and MGC in one of the parties. So we're doing a hybrid round one, and then in person round 2 and 3. So we do 752 here. So so that's how it's happening. And then bid day is in person. So yeah, the only virtual component is going to be that first round.
And I have seen more and more schools coming out with information about what their recruitment schedules are going to look like on the sorority side. Panhellenics are putting out information whether or not they're going to be all in person or hybrid models. And I've seen both out there. And I follow a lot of groups on Instagram, and they're making their posts and getting women to sign up for recruitment. So that's what I think probably the biggest question that Panhellenics are getting at this point, which is why they're posting, because I feel like this year more than any other year, I've seen more, sign up for recruitment. We're in person this year, because I think they're excited about going back to in person, but also it's still July. Like, that's the weird part for me. Like, I feel like so much can still change come the end of August going in September. So I don't know what that's going to look like. Kari, go ahead. You have your hand raised.
Yeah, so this is a question for Chris. So you guys have your NPHC and your MDC chapters with the Panhellenic chapters for recruitment?
For Panhellenic recruitment, since it's Sorority 101, that was a change I made in the recruitment process here at FIU when I came in 2015. And so MPHC and MGC organizations do like a massive info session as part of the Panhellenic recruitment round. So just like if they were going to go visit one chapter, one of the visits is to MPHC and MGC, and then all of the PNMs, because our student population in Miami is very diverse. And so we've had a lot of issues that we've had women who have signed up for Panhellenic recruitment who drop, and mess up our statistics because they think that AKA, Delta, Zeta, SG Rho are all part of the sorority recruitment process. And then they realize that the Divine Nine is not part of that process. And so they end up dropping out. Same for those people that want to join multicultural organizations. And so that is the opportunity. And then it also educates, right? People that only think there's Panhellenic organizations, they get educated on like, hey, culturally based organizations exist. And so it's a true Sorority 101 recruitment in that first round of Panhellenic recruitment, where everybody's exposed to all of the sororities on campus.
And then do they drop out of the recruitment process?
Yes, they fall out.
And then those people.
It's cool. And so, it's just like, just because of the fact that if you educate people, that's why the whole thing, when, you say, do your research, you need to research your organization before you go ahead and sign up to something. So it doesn't, like, if People have their stuff the week before school. You have to have a whole semester in and everything like that before joining in most NPHC organizations. So that shouldn't even matter. I mean, like that education, that's great. You get the education, but you need to be educating yourself the entire semester, not just a little tiny bit of time.
Right. But again, that's just an exposure piece. You know what I mean? So like if you just want to join a sorority and you just don't know, you know what I mean? And you're a person of color that wants to join an organization, perhaps you're a first generation college student, that's the very first exposure that you might get, right, to joining an organization. And since it is required for you to, well, and also it's fall recruitment, right? That's primary recruitment at FIU. And so that gives them the opportunity to like, hey, you know, we have more informationals, we have week of events, you're more than welcome to visit those. That information is available here, here, here. Follow us on Instagram for more information, and boom, that's it, right? So like, gotcha. They do their round during Sorority 101, and then MPHC and MGC fall off of the rotation.
I got you. I mean, I get it. You know, like I guess that shows the difference in between institutions, because that necessarily, not saying it wouldn't, but it wouldn't necessarily work. I mean, like when people are like, oh yeah, for Panhellenic recruitment here, like they do their thing, whatever else. They had not a very big recruitment this last year with COVID.
Right.
Well, NPHC organizations, AK had 52, you know, Delta had 45, SGRO had 20 something, you know, like, so it never changed. It actually increased, you know, like, so the thing is like going the other way necessarily would have hurt them, not helped them. Okay. Right. No, I was just inquiring.
Well, and I mean, initially the first couple of years of doing that, it was difficult, right? Because MGC and MPHC literally had no concept of how to do Panhellenic recruitment, right? Literally the first years that they showed up to do that, they showed up in their, you know, stepping boots and windbreaker jackets, you know, and it was a complete, I don't want to say it was a disaster, but it was a 180 than how the Panhellenic women were presenting themselves, right? And so in these years, we've learned that there's a time and place for everything, right? And just like an AKA wouldn't show up in her strolling or stepping boots to a informational tea, right? She wouldn't show up dressed the same for this first round of recruitment, right? There's business recruitment, and then there's fun recruitment, right? And we need to be able to showcase both aspects of that, but you know, there's a time and place for everything. And so it actually was very, very beneficiary for the organizations to be able to share their information and be exposed to people that they otherwise would never have even thought about joining an MPHC or an MGC organization. And a lot of women that have gone through Panhellenic recruitment have also, like when they're disappointed, you know, about like, oh, this wasn't for me. And I'm like, well, remember, you guys saw MGC and MPHC. So, and at FIU, the population is different, right? So like our MGC and Panhellenic literally look exactly alike when it comes to the demographic of people, because we're a Hispanic serving institution, literally like 65% Hispanic. So our chapters, demographically speaking, language spoken, they're all the same for the most part. You know what I mean? The only thing that varies in everything is the traditions and cultures aspect of the organizations. But
it makes sense. No, that's what I'm saying. You know, it makes sense. Ours is not. Ours is massively different. You know, like, so that's all there is to it. Like, people know, you know, like, because we do a lot of work before the semester even starts. You know what you're doing. You know what the different organizations stand for. You're doing a lot of different things, even within, you know, like, that's just what it's all about. You know, like, just because, like, we don't need to go ahead. I mean, you should already know, we treat kind of like becoming a member of anything. Treat it as serious as it is. Like when you sign a car or whatever else, you need to know what you're getting into. You just don't do it within a week decision. And if you do, that's a problem.
Right. But again, you know, it's also creating a moment of exposure to people that otherwise would never have been exposed before, right? So you have your Panhellenic women that would have gone through Panhellenic recruitment, never, I taught leadership classes at Indiana University as well. And all those Pan-Hellenic women didn't even know MPHC or MGC existed, so this is doing a service to Pan-Hellenic and bridging gaps more for Pan-Hellenic women to be aware and informed that, hey, Pan-Hellenic isn't the only council that exists that has sororities, if that makes sense. So it's
no, it all does. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but the thing is that if the Pan-Hellenic itself doesn't look at, because if you look at the end of their paperwork, it says that if you're part of an CPC or a Pan-Hellenic organization, you can't join another. Well, you can't join another NPHC organization either. Doesn't say that. So why? I mean, it's just being educated at the school. And I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You need to go ahead. You need to find that out before, that's all there is to it. And I get it. That's a place where it's happening. But I know we're getting into, because I was really just wondering. But let me let you go.
But I have a question for you, Kari, to kind of go along with that. I agree that people should know what they're signing up for, and anybody should come into a process fully educated. But I feel like as sometimes a 17 or 18-year-old, a lot of times they don't. I mean, think about just financial aid, right? I feel like they're signing their life away. They don't know that they're going to owe the thousands of dollars after the fact. I mean, we hope that they do, but we just tell them oh, sign here, sign here, sign here. And magically they get all this money, right? So when you say that y'all do a lot of education beforehand, before they even get to campus and giving out that information, which I think is awesome. What does your retention rate look like for organizations on Pan-Hellenic and NPHC groups, across the board? Do you hold on to your membership throughout graduation?
Yes, NPHC has 100%. Pan-Hellenic has less than 50%. So that's what I'm saying. It would definitely hurt us. It works because of the fact that people look at it as it is an absolute learning experience, because once the learning experience starts in the very beginning, it doesn't stop. And it doesn't do, it's because a lot of times people get pressured into joining different organizations, because they want family or whatever else. That has nothing to do with it. Learn about the organization, learn completely about the organization. If you're not doing, because me personally, I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha. As a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, if I go ahead and I look at your, let's say, which I used to do, it's different now, but I would tell people to go ahead and not clear their computer. And I would have to see that they looked at every single organization. And if they didn't, we have nothing to talk about anymore, because you did not do your research. You did not do your job. You don't know about every organization. And not only do I mean, define non-organization, I'm saying you need to look at all kind of people. And if I don't see it, we got a problem. And I tell these guys here the same thing. Just because, I don't know. I just feel like the peer pressure thing is much bigger than the educational piece. So the thing is that I want people to be educated without worrying about peers.
Yeah, and I think too, there's not only just a peer, but kind of going back to your point of just family, if you're a legacy, there's pressure that you have to join that sorority or that fraternity because your mom or your dad or your grandma or sister, brother, whomever did. And sometimes it gets to a point where they're just going to accept a bid just to please their family, even if it's not the house that their, whomever their family member was a member of. And that's another thing too. At least with NPC organizations, it's your legacies, and for some chapters, some organizations, they're a top tier, they're your go-to, pretty much, I don't care if this girl doesn't fit in here, we have to take her, otherwise we're gonna get in trouble, or that pressure or whatever. And it's really sad. And there's times it's actually gotten to the point where some PNMs won't even put if they're a legacy or not, because they want to have an open mind, go through this without that pressure. And that's what I say to women all the time is, you have to go through this with an open mind. You could go into recruitment, look at their Instagrams, their Twitters, their TikToks, and be oh, I want to join that sorority. But you get there the first day and it's this isn't what I saw online. This isn't what, because now it's a whole new dynamic. Or there could have been a sorority that at the beginning of the week you weren't crazy about, but as time went on, it got better. I think too, with the membership in NPC organizations, that's a two-folded question. There's a lot of different elements, especially now. But I think too, the one thing I've always respected about the Divine Nine is just y'all are so passionate about your organizations, not just in college, but afterwards. Like you see so many alumni that will just come out and you would like they were back in college, like so much spirit and that same fire and energy. And that's something I've always respected. Like you really value what your organizations were founded upon. And with NPC and IFC, I don't want to say that they don't, but I sometimes think they get into the whole social aspect of it where they have that, that's a whole other thing. Oh, there you go. But yeah, but no, that's that's just kind of what I've witnessed. And I mean, my school, in fact, I don't even think any schools in the Pittsburgh area have NPHC or any Divine Nine organizations. So yeah, so for me, that's one thing I told my the two individuals I'm working with at Long Beach. I said, I need to learn more about these organizations because I want to, and I need to learn how they do recruitment, what is their process like, their membership like, and stuff like that. And that's something too, even at these schools where maybe they're not as diverse as FIU, UNT, correct me if I'm wrong, Kari, is predominantly white ish.
We went from actually a Hispanic serving institution 2 years ago to now we're a multicultural serving institution.
Okay. I just can't remember the demographics down there, so forgive me. But yeah, I mean, just thinking about that, in my area, a lot of schools are predominantly white. I mean, but that's just the area in which I grew up in. So that's why for me, I'm trying to get out of my area for for other reasons too. But yeah, I just think that's another way too to build community, coming back into these campuses back and bringing our virtual communities into the real world. And this is an opportunity where we can get them all to interact and do events together and show yes, we're part of different organizations, but when you get to the core of it, whether you're a Divine Nine, an NPC or an IFC or MGC group.
Sarah, I think you went.
So that's something you can all bond over. You can pair up and do.
Sarah, you cut out completely. We did not hear what you said.
Did?
Yeah. When you were saying if you were an NPC group, MPHC,
okay.
NPC
Can
group,
you hear me
and then
now?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I was just saying if you're when you get to the core of it all, when you look at our values and what we represent, that's we're all very similar than we are different. And I think that's something we can take into consideration when we come back to campus as well.
So for y'all and thinking about coming back to campus, and I think we have a pretty diverse, even just with the five of us, right? Different experiences and being virtual or not, or being in person the entire time. What does that look like for y'all, or what's your thought process going forward into a semester where if we are coming back to all in person or doing a hybrid recruitment model, what are some of your thoughts, or what do you have any plans at this point to really help kind of bridge that gap for the people that may have come in during a virtual process or may not have been exposed to the full fraternity sorority community or the full campus community yet? What does that social experience look like on your campuses as we are talking more about kind of bringing all of these students back together and back to campus and kind of coordinating an effort, not only by the institution, but how are we guiding our student leaders to do that on our campuses, and what does that look like?
So at FIU, they're for sophomores, because those are the rising sophomores are the ones that were in their COVID year 2020. Mm-hmm. So the whole year, it's basically called sophomore takeover. And so we're being intentional about events and programs. So stuff that would be normally for a freshman, we're actually doing them for freshmen and sophomores because this is their first time in college, right? Even though they have a whole year under their belt virtually, personally, they don't, right? Personally, they're straight high schoolers that are still going to be awkward, still not going to have friends, still like, well, they might have friends, but not like if you would have been in person. And so this whole year's worth of programming, it's called the sophomore takeover, along with all of our freshman orientation stuff and freshman programs as well. So even for academic convocation, all of the sophomores are being invited to come as well. They had a virtual one, but usually for an in-person one, they get a free t-shirt, they have like an organizational fair and stuff like that. And so both freshmen and sophomores are invited to academic convocation this year, along with their families, so that their families then get acquainted as well.
So is there an expectation for them to attend, or is it just kind of open for them to decide if they want to be part of that experience?
Well, there's incentives, right? So they have like this badge system. And so it's like a leadership badge. And so the more events that fit into those categories, at the end of their career, if they've met all of the badges, then they get a special recognition for graduation. And so attending academic convocation is part of that, and attending events for sophomore takeover is part of that. So that's only, they're silly, I think, silly initiatives, but I think they're very motivating in regards to like getting students to come out and, venture.
Well, and it's an intentional process, right? That you really, as an institution and as administration, has thought out to a point where you can go back and say, no, we made these opportunities available for our students that may not have had this first year experience, but we carried it over into their second year experience where they still had the same type of opportunities at the end of the day, because we know that they missed out. I mean, honestly, that's what it comes down to for me. Like, I feel bad. Like, I talked to the women in my own organization and I'm like, okay, I had a conversation last night because I'm a recruitment coach for my own organization. I was like, okay. And they do informal recruitment for the first semester. So I was like, all right, their institution actually has not set whether or not they're going to be allowing in-person events for recruitment, or they've been told they may have to be outside for the first few events, whatever it may look like, right? But I was like, okay, let's talk about the women that came through this virtual experience. Have you thought about how you're really going to bring them into the fold and what that's going to look like for them? And they're like, we really haven't, but we can talk about it. I was like, I think there needs to be some thought and an intentionality there, because you want them to feel like they are part of that group, and you want to make those connections where it's really different meeting people in person for the first time as opposed to seeing each other on a screen, like that's just the reality of it. And I think what I said earlier is we are going to have to be creative and kind, because some people's comfortability level is going to be looking very different. So when I said that, they're like, yeah, you're totally right. And I was like, yeah, I've been at this for a while.
We also have to consider too, just across the board, our seniors. The leadership in them is going to be astronomical, right? Because they're really the only ones who have a full in-person traditional year under their belt. Whereas even the juniors, there are some schools that are having things for juniors because they only have one semester under their belt in person. So, and I was saying to Amanda last night, like, just with the women that I advise, the seniors are the only ones who know how to do in-person recruitment as an initiated member, our rituals in person, our chapters in person with ritual and stuff like that. I said, you can't check out right now. Like, this is your chance to really step up and be those leaders. And that's a first conversation I'm having with our exec board, especially those who are seniors, because this is it. Like, you're the only ones who know how to do this. It's that, or guess what? Your advisors are going to step in and do it for you. And I don't think you want that, right? So we want to make sure that this is like a audition to really show what you have, like, in terms of leadership. And again, this is even outside of FSL, right? like you have on your student organizations, or just, you know, motivating students to go to class. That's another thing too, is the motivational level. But the one thing I do want to kind of set straight though is, it's great that we have like all these ideas and programming, but the reality is we're never going to go back to how things were in fall of 2019. And it's not just because of the pandemic, it's our world's in a different place than when we left it in March 2020. We have other issues that our students are facing, some brought on by the pandemic, and then others based off of events going on in our world. And, you know, our colleges are kind of getting that, or universities rather, are getting those, you know, making those tweaks and those adjustments. In fact, I'm going to be writing a little brief article for our website about, we need to stop comparing fall of 2019 to fall of 2021, because even if we do go back in person and do all these in-person things, there are different elements that are going to be different. Some of the offices may no longer be on campus because they're now completely virtual to save on space. For us in student affairs, we may be a hybrid model where we're in the office a couple days a week versus 5 days a week. And maybe how we conduct meetings and being more flexible and stuff like that. But yeah, so be on the lookout for that brief little article I'll be writing about why we need to stop comparing fall of 2019 to fall of 2021, because they are different. That's like saying we're going to go back to how things were before 9/11 in the few years after 9/11, right? Like we were never the same and never going to be the same. So
Well, and even Sarah brings up a good point about offices, right? Like even for organizations, there's been a ton of organizations that I've seen that have created DEI positions within their own organizations, and not the organization necessarily saying that they need to do that, but chapters themselves are saying, these are important topics that we need to cover and discuss. So we need to make sure that we are really kind of diving in and looking to be educational in our conversations. So let's create this position on our executive board or a committee of some sort, where I think we're going to see more of that. I think that's great. I think the college campus is the ideal location for people to get that information from. So I think it is going to be interesting in just in general to see. I know, William, you had your hand up. I saw that real quick.
Yeah, I ended up just putting my question in the chat. I was just asking if I could get the website URL.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I want to read that article. So
yeah,
Sarah helped me out.
Awesome.
yeah, I'm gonna try to put it out this coming week at some point. I'm gonna be working on it over the weekend. It'll be very brief. I'm not gonna be writing War and Peace or a dissertation about it, but pretty much like kind of what I just said right now. I actually got the inspiration from a LinkedIn post. Someone posted that same concept saying, this is why we can't, why we can't do that. So yeah, a lot of it's mostly common sense, but it needs to be said.
And Chris, to your comment about NPC keeping the same totals as fall 19, 100% agree. I will be the first person to say I am a member of an NPC organization and I am not an NPC fan. I mean, and I've been pretty vocal in the field about that. I mean, just my dissertation in and of itself researched and pretty much proved that RFM doesn't necessarily help women psychologically. So what else? Any other questions? Because I know we're getting to our hour, but any other thoughts and questions that y'all might have that you wanted some more information on?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Actually, I just wanted, it's kind of a comment. Something that I do not say, it's because like everything that a lot of people like to say is just basically bullet points. For example, I'm going to go ahead and use something that's a lot of people use, especially us. Greek unity. I agree with that totally. Trust me. But it has no direction. No direction. And that pisses me off. Like just because like, okay, great. Okay, you're saying Greek unity. What? So all the isms, racism, classism, ageism, everything like that is going to all of a sudden dissipate because you got 2 or 3 letters on your chest? So that's what you think. No, there's some work that's got to be done. So what
There's a
I
lot of
tell
work
people,
that has to be done.
so what I tell my
lot.
people is council unity, Greek civility. That's what I say. And the thing is, I don't care if people get upset at it. I don't, because the thing is that like my stuff works. Mine is proven with growth, period. So the thing is, when people are like, oh no, but we need to go ahead and Greek civility, or Greek unity. A lot of times that's just checking a box. Like, oh yeah, we see these certain people there with different hues of skin. That doesn't mean anything. They got together, they took a picture, and then what happened after that? They most likely ran away from each other.
That's why I hate Greek Week.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan
makes
of
no
Greek
sense.
Week at all, because we preach, oh, Greek unity, but then let's pit everybody against one another. Cool.
It doesn't always have substance too. Like when we say be Panhellenic, I mean, there are times where it is genuine, where there are girls who are friends in other houses, and you see that. Like there is times when it's genuine, but a lot of the time I think it's more of a photo op or a good marketing tool to say, oh, we're Greek unified. And it's empty. It's like, okay, we all took a picture together, but the time will tell, like when you're on campus, like, are you really unified? Like you can, like, I encourage everybody, like, listen, you can be friends with people in different organizations, right? Like it's cool, like, you know what I mean? But it has to be genuine. It can't be from this place of, oh, well, we're being told to do this, and or we're going to do this to make ourselves look good, because in reality it's just going to come back to bite you in the butt. But that's just my take on it. That's like a lot of the NPC organizations now are saying, we're going to start diversity, equity, and inclusion, but then it's like it seems kind of empty still. It's like, but where, like, I don't know how to even explain it. It's just, you want to put this out here, but you're not getting the full support and the tools and resources that you need. It's like, oh, we're going to put this out here to make it look more appealing, but eventually it's going to come out that you don't really have anything.
Well, and that's what I think is going to be interesting. And I think we have a responsibility in that, to make sure that they are headed in the right direction, and not just a position holder or a title, on an executive board, to really be making sure that we're challenging them and being educational in those challenges, that challenge and support factor. That's kind of how I have dealt with a lot of student stuff.
And I think overall, constant education, not just like that DEI person that gets selected for that position, needs to be someone that is open-minded, or has at least some knowledge, right, of different people and different cultures and stuff. Because just to have an example, this spring semester we had FINEU was one of our first chapters that added that position at FIU. And I remember getting an email from the newly elected DEI chair on their executive board, sending me an email in February saying, Chris, who can I talk to in MPHC so that they can come do a little presentation about Black history, since it's Black History Month? Really, bro? You just gonna email me and tell me just to, find an MPHC person? And I'm like, you know what? Like, if you need a presentation on a specific topic, I can come do the presentation, but I'm not going to expose my MPHC students to that kind of approach or that kind of unhealthy, like, conversation. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like, I don't know, like,
well, and it's a different conversation to me. Like, if I was put in that type of situation, and I have not been put in that particular situation yet, but I feel like it's coming, and I think that that's what we need to be prepared for. Like, I would sit down with that woman and be like, when you contacted me to do that, this is the feeling that I walked away with. And even just that conversation of the feeling different about something, I think is really important. Like, this was a personal example. Like, a friend and I just watched the movie In the Heights, right? Loved it. I thought it was a great movie. I'm from New York originally, and she's not. So she's from Louisiana originally. And I'm like, oh yeah, like that totally happens. Like in the city, they'll, people when it's hot will definitely open up the fire hydrants, right? And that's just like a cultural thing that happens in New York, right? And it's not just a Latinx thing because the movie is about that, right? But she was like, I can't, like, that would never happen here. Like, it was just very interesting, the different dynamic that I had seen versus what she had been exposed to. And even still, like, I know there's been all this conversation about the movie and kind of the cancel culture of Lin-Manuel Miranda. And like, that's a topic for another webinar, clearly. But, even just the two of us as friends kind of sharing that information. And I thought it was so interesting how, and I guess I was appreciative of the fact that we come from two very different worlds. We're in the same organization, but we're still able to have that conversation just based on our different backgrounds. And even her, like, I understand that because Louisiana culture is very different than New York culture. And I've been down here for 6 years, so I can say that, but
very different.
yeah, so it's a north-south thing. I mean, there's so much involved. So I think that DEI conversation is going to continue to come up for sure. And I kind of welcome it because I think it is really important. It's one of the things, actually, I'm glad that Sarah was able to put our website in the chat box. There's a bunch of stuff because my research had originally started with the topic of efficacy and recruitment. So there is stuff on there about efficacy and doing different facilitated conversations regarding that in recruitment. But one of the things that I've been working on too is some conversations to have with groups surrounding the topic of diversity and bringing that into the recruitment or through the recruitment lens, I would say. So that should be going up. That kind of little snippet of information for that program should be coming up on the website within the next few days. Also, because I think it is going to be really important going into this fall semester.
Hey, Amanda.
Yeah.
Actually, shoot, remember, I'm a Louisiana person too. I lived in Louisiana. So even New Orleans and Cajun country are mad different.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. It was so fun. Not funny that you say that at all, but I just had, okay. Because I've been working from home and I am working remotely, I have spent so much time watching television, probably way too much television, but I try to at least be educational when I'm watching something. So I just had the opportunity to watch the Spike Lee documentary of when the levees broke for when Katrina happened. And I had watched like part one last year when we were all quarantined, and then I didn't have HBO to continue to watch in the other 3 parts, but now I do. So I was like, oh, let me watch this. And so different, like 2 completely different worlds, and where people ended up throughout the United States, like it just affected people so differently after everything that happened here. So it was so interesting to me. Like, I love that. And I'm like texting my friend because she was here. She's the Louisianian that was here. And I'm from New York, but I was working at Penn State at the time that Katrina happened. And she was like, oh yeah, this happened. I was like, oh my God, we raised so much money for Katrina. Like, I wish I would have been like friendlier with the women from my own sorority, that I would have been able to send them money directly for the people that were directly affected instead of going through the Red Cross, because everything was so all over the place at the time. So it just continues to broaden my perspective so much. So, and I love that. And I consider myself a lifelong learner. So I like to pass that along to students too. But anyway, anything else before we kind of wrap up? Okay.
I think that the biggest thing that we're gonna have to worry about is the communication amongst everybody. Everybody's got to relearn. Everybody, even time to, because like how many times people are so used to, for now, to go to class, they just got to go ahead. They're doing nothing, whatever else. They just sit down, press a button, and get on for class, and they're on time. Well,
Right.
Guess what? That's not it anymore. They're going to have to actually do effort. And to Sarah's point, like, it's going to be very different for some people. They've never had that, or they've been away from that. Let's do that, because they've had it in primary and secondary school. But
Mhm.
like, they've been away from that for a while. And so that's what they think it is. And that's not it. So how are we as professionals as well? Because we're so used to, okay, you need to be here at 8 o'clock. And they're not going to be here at 8 o'clock.
Mhm.
All right, so maybe we need to work with them to get them there at 8 o'clock. But the thing is, I can guarantee you, most people are just going to go ahead and say, no, 8 o'clock. You know, like, it's got to be this, and not have any give.
Yeah.
There is no instruction to it. And once again, I cannot stand that without direction. I
Mhm.
cannot stand that just going ahead and saying something. And if you have no way of going about it, then you shouldn't say anything, really.
Yeah, agreed.
Or getting rid of multitasking. So like being in class, but also being in a student meeting on another window and whatnot. And I'm like, no,
I don't know how people can do that. I can like
I can't.
my concentration level. I'm like, what? Wait, what did I miss? Like, I couldn't imagine.
I have literally sat in a meeting with Zoom where I had another student in person with me in the same room, and they're in the meeting listening with me, and then in class, in their other computer. I'm like, you're not making any progress
No.
in this meeting or learning anything in your classroom. So right now, you're balanced out to zero because you're not benefiting anybody, yourself or your leadership position at this time.
Well, and I think those are the points that technology has hurt us, right? Even like, we say like the commenting on social media, whatever platform it is, right? Like they'll make a comment on there and not confronting their roommate on something, or within a chapter saying something, in their group me that goes against somebody else in the chapter. Like there's so many things that I think have harmed our socialization because of technology, that I think that especially now, because they're so used to utilizing their technology for all those things, I think that that's going to continue to be a really important conversation to continue.
And even for students too, that if you went to schools where your classes were not live, where you could log on whenever, that's another thing too. Like when I used to be a high school substitute teacher up until about a couple weeks ago when I sent my resignation in. I had students that did their whole last year completely remote, and you could pick and choose when you decided to be remote. Like if you woke up Monday morning and felt like I'm not going to school, you didn't have to go. You could do your work remotely, or actually better yet, all you had to do was log in your attendance and mark that you're present, but then go back to bed until 3 in the afternoon. And that's another thing too, with some, like when I did my master's, I did it completely virtual. And so we did discussion board, but again, it wasn't like at a set time. It was just make sure you meet the deadline. And I like the flexibility of it. And I think that's one thing that we're probably going to incorporate is flexibility, because who doesn't like to be a little bit flexible here and there? But we also have to set the standard of, no, like you got to go to class. Like if you sign up for an in-person class, you need to be there. Like this is your responsibility. It's like work. You don't show up to work, guess what? You're going to lose your job,
Right.
Plain and simple.
Well, and I'd rather them learn that in college than getting out into the real world and being very blown away by the fact that like that actually exists. And like,
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank y'all so much. I appreciate our time together. I hope this was helpful. If you want to continue some conversations, definitely feel free to email us. Check out the website. We're probably, like Sarah said, she has that blog coming out this week. There's other blogs that I've posted up there. But if there is a webinar topic that you are looking for and again, this is just a space to have conversations. I don't consider myself an expert outside of anything remotely fraternity sorority related. Like the only thing I know that I studied was efficacy and recruitment. So I can talk about that for a really long time, but other stuff, I just like to toss around ideas and have some good conversations. So I'm appreciative of everybody's time today. And like I said, I will get this posted up on the website. I have a YouTube channel that's connected to it, so you can always go back and listen to it if need be. And hopefully we'll see each other again sometime soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye.